Professor Jeff Miley, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. So, as you know, there was the Freedom for Ocalan campaign. The new campaign has been launched from 74 different points of the world. So, how important is that campaign, first of all?
I think the campaign is crucial in particular, for a resolution of the Kurdish question or problem in Turkey, but also more generally across the Middle East. Ocalan is a key role player in any scenario which is a reconciliation and truth and reconciliation and peace process. Ocalan also is quite a figure of reverence for lots of people in Kurdistan. Of course, he's seen as, in some respects, the embodiment of the Kurdish people. His plight and his struggle somehow reflective of the nature of the Kurdish struggle. And he has also been very active while in prison in inhumane conditions, which must be stressed, that the conditions in which he's been held for almost a quarter of a century now are totally inhumane and go against international law. But he's managed to respond to that situation with existential struggle of the highest variety, leading to intellectual paradigm shift. So he's he's helped come into being this paradigm of the democratic confederalism as an alternative to the nation state. And I think in that respect, he's an original thinker whose contribution from terrible conditions has been very important for people on the left, not only on the Kurdish left, but more generally in a left that is bereft of models. So the paradigm, I think, the democratic confederal paradigm, I think, is also really important. So when we talk about Ocalan, we talk about the significance of Ocalan, we also talk about the political project that he's the leader of, that he's inspired in particularly in Rojava, but also all across the Kurdish context.
Thank you, Professor Jeff. Also, secondly, what are your concerns about the current treatment of Abdullah Öcalan in prison? Very shortly, that one, please.
Yeah, it's definitely a concern. As I said, the conditions that he's been held in Raleigh Island are inhumane. He hasn't been able to talk to his lawyers. He hasn't been able to talk to his family. He's been completely isolated. And we don't know anything about him for the last couple of years. We don't even know if he's healthy. So given the key role that he plays in a potential peace process, I think it's really important. He's not immortal. He's not going to live forever. So it's really important that we normalize relations with him and we open him up to the world again. And hopefully he could play, as I say, an important role in a peace process.
Thank you. You already mentioned the importance of Öcalan about the peace process as well. Just to underline that, why is Abdullah Öcalan is an important figure in that case? Very shortly, that one as well, please.
Well, because he's seen to be the embodiment of the Kurdish movement. He's inspired. He's an inspiration to millions of people who are organizing around a politics of Kurdish self-determination, understood not as a nation state, but as in terms of radical democracy against the state, a version of democracy against the state that also very much puts gender emancipation at the center of the struggle, as well as a struggle for ecological sustainability and multicultural, multi-religious, multi-ethnic accommodation. So the treatment of Öcalan is also associated with the treatment of that alternative.
What else needs to be done to support the campaign? How can this campaign be made a bigger campaign, a more effective campaign? So what should be the next step of this campaign? What is your suggestion?
I think it's important to always be stressing what a critical role he can play in a peace process. And I think that we have, for example, with trade unions, different elements of society organizing around a solidarity with the Kurdish cause. And I think it's important to make the link between Öcalan the person and the paradigm that he has articulated and embodies, so that people can understand what a key role he plays, and people from across Europe and across the world, in fact, can call for his freedom as a prerequisite for a peace process.
Thank you. Also, would like to ask you about the Öcalan and his ideas, because you also written a book about the democratic confederalism, which is Turkey and its allies of the Western powers are afraid of from Öcalan. Why they afraid of Öcalan and his ideas? What is the main point of that? If you can try to explain that in a short brief, please.
Yeah, I mean, he plays such an important role, as I say, because not only because of his situation in the movement, but also because of what his ideas signify. His ideas signify an alternative to self-determination, understood as a desire for an independent nation state, and instead sort of manages to articulate an understanding of self-determination as radical democracy against the state, self-determination as implying and embodying gender emancipation, self-determination as implying and embodying ecological sustainability, self-determination as implying and embodying multicultural, multi-ethnic, multi-religious accommodation. So this is not just a fantasy that he's sketched, but it's also a program and a political roadmap that has been implemented in large part in the northeast of Syria. And in the northeast of Syria, what we see instantiated in the Rojava regime is an alternative to the spiraling negative dialectic of tyranny and chaos engulfing the region and increasingly the world. And so if we're going to have an alternative to this horrific apocalyptic scenario that we face, I think that Öcalan embodies that alternative. And for that reason, he is a historical figure who's not just the leader of the Kurdish movement, but also the leader of an alternative freedom movement that somehow surpasses and responds to some of the weaknesses of the 20th century emancipatory agenda.
Thank you, Professor. Also, lastly, very shortly, can you please give your Freedom for Öcalan message as well?
Yes. So it's been 25 years, almost 25 years, a quarter of a century that Öcalan has been trapped in Imrali, chained to the rock of Imrali. He remains a figure of highest esteem for many people, an inspiration for political struggle around the world. And his freedom, as I say, is a prerequisite for a democratic, peaceful resolution to the Kurdish situation in Turkey, the Kurdish question in Turkey, but also an alternative to the politics of tyranny and chaos that have been engulfing the region. And increasingly the world. So the Freedom for Öcalan is part of the emancipatory agenda of the 21st century, a freedom agenda. So for that reason, I think it's very important to support the campaign.
Thank you, Professor Jeff Miley. Thanks for joining us, and thank you for your valuable comments.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.